a man ago, and I was here yesterday starting at about 5:15, 5:20. I witnessed the brutality of these OUSD event staff, initiating violence on our community members. It was unacceptable. I think that this is evidence of the continued lack of trust and faith that community members have. Again, this is a school that was closed without any engagement, without the board following its own board policy, in violation of a policy that I helped to organize around, the reparations for Black students. And it was very disappointing to see the continuation of the lack of leadership in our district. And I think that the call for the board and the superintendent to acknowledge that the violence here was a violation of our own values and our principles is really critical.
And you talk about reparations. I mean, it seems like they're closing down public schools in Black and brown communities. What does that say about the treatment of the Black and brown and working class community?
I mean, I think it's evidence of our claim of why we demanded the policy. We argued that over the last 2 decades, 16 of the schools closed in the district have been majority Black schools. And so we are disappointed, but also encouraged that the community is now seeing the very reason we organized for this policy. What's most disappointing at this point is that the district exempted itself from the policy to vote to close these schools. And so I'm proud of these families and these communities demanding community engagement, taking back this community school and serving the community in a way that the district has failed to do because of the lack of leadership. Leadership needs to take accountability, and we need to ensure that there is a clear demand across this city for accountability to the Parker community. There were residents out here, there were community members out here standing with the activists to say that this violence was not acceptable. And that was the scene last night. It was all love, and we were all met with violence.
And the kids in this community, they go to this school, they walk to the school. If this school closes, how will they be affected?
I mean, the biggest thing that people should know is that the district hasn't done a very good job with creating welcoming schools, as they said in this policy. And so, one of the things that was raised was that, hey, did you do an environmental analysis as required by our environmental laws here in California to assess the safety of our students walking to the other schools? One of the schools close to here, Markham, is across a major intersection, 73rd, where we have had many challenges. I mean, we're talking about over 4 lanes of traffic that we're asking students to cross. And in that very intersection, we've had incidents in the past, and the crossing guards really fearing for their life. So we don't have we're not convinced that the district has done its due diligence. It has not answered the call of parents like Rochelle and Zena to get real concrete evidence of why they targeted this specific school and why they're targeting other majority Black and brown schools here in Oakland.
And what do you think is behind this?
I think that there is definitely a concentrated effort to snatch public property and sell it. If you look on the board work plan that's being talked about right now at the board retreat, you see that they have a goal to use surplus property and ensure that there's not blight in neighborhoods. That is a direct call and a direct evidence that they are closing our schools to be able to sell property off to developers. And there's no conversation that I know of between the district and the city to talk about using that property for affordable housing, which is a desperate need in our community to keep our families like me, working families like Rochelle, in our city. So we have to make sure that we're really clear. The intention behind this is not very clear, not trustworthy, and this is why so many of us are running for school board, because we know that there's a need for leadership that will be accountable to the community and not to special interests.
All right, my name is Michael Shane, and I am a teacher and parent in Oakland Unified School District.
And have you been participating, supporting this occupation?
Yes.
And what's happening here as far as teachers and education?
Well, so, last year, obviously, there was, a teaching staff here. All those teaching staff have been reassigned to other schools within the district, and this building, Parker, which formerly was a K-8, is now shut down. There will be no public education happening here led by OUSD for the 2022-2023 school year.
And it was said at this press conference that it's a $97 billion surplus. It's not a money issue. You're getting money from community schools. Oakland is. There's a lot of money. So what is behind this, and why are they doing this?
Well, like I can't, say, with I can't be, 100% sure, but my guess is that this has a lot to do with the land that the school sits on, as well as, the facilities here are still pretty quality facilities. It's a big building with spacious classrooms.
So this is a great facility for education.
I would definitely say that the district had, no reason to close this school based on the facilities.
And they approved the expansion of charters and opening up new charters at the same time they're closing this public school?
Well, Oakland per capita at one point, I believe still does, has the most charters in California. They've closed, I believe, since 2003, maybe 20 schools, and I believe 2/3 of them did not stay closed. They reopened as charter schools.
And Tony Thurmond, the Department of Public Education, Gavin Newsom are in support of charter schools. This community funding of schools is going to go to charters. What do you think about public money and these politicians who the unions support giving money to charters and supporting charters?
Well, for me, knowing, the nature of the Democratic Party, especially here in California, which I would basically describe as a machine, a Democratic Party machine, and they've been very friendly to the charter industry and the privatization industry from the beginning, as I understand it, because the state constitution had to be amended for charters to even be legal. With they had a clause in the Constitution that said any publicly led facility that gets public funds must be ran by a democratically elected board or whatnot. I don't know if I exactly have the language right, but they had to amend that for charter schools to be able to operate in the state of California. Since then, they've passed legislation like Prop 39, which allows charters to claim unused space. And so the district over the years has given, charter schools these, really nice, pieces of public schools, whether it's, a whole floor or a whole hallway.
That's co-location?
It's called co-location. That's through Prop 39, and it's basically legally, the charters have a legal right to take space that is declared underutilized. But as a public school teacher, I know that for the most part, we're always, scrambling for extra space where, we could, lead, smaller group exercises where they could do, enrichment activities like music, art. So this is why, charters in the state have become, a huge problem. It's just not only are they, basically given whole campuses, they're also taking, public school space and then, essentially, becoming, a school on the same campus as a public school. My site that I've taught at for years, King Estates, is chopped up between 4 different schools now.
What does that do for education when you have this co-location process where you've got 4 separate schools in the same public school location?
So it's a scramble for space where charters are the charter schools are constantly trying to claim extra space, take it from the public school. It leads to this kind of absurd thing where, also in Oakland, their enrollment. So, there's competition for, students now. So that we see the charters constantly, trying to get,
They're marketing and trying to sell.
They're recruiting.
They're using their money, which may be public money, to market private schools.
And they also have, foundation money, which is private sector money, which allows them to hire people to go out and recruit, to provide extra stuff, as far as, the bureaucracies involved that specifically is helpful in, convincing families to, leave their public school, go to their charter school. And the other issue, obviously, is that the charters do not provide the same level of education with special ed, language services, all the expensive things that, the public school provides for families. Charter schools, try their damnedest to not provide those services.
And Reed Hastings, who's the owner of Netflix, gave $3 million for Prop 39. It was also supported by the California Federation of Teachers and the CTA. Why would they support a proposition like that helped privatization?
And you're talking about Netflix, the good Netflix guy? That's a great question. Obviously, I don't know, the exact answers, guesstimating is that these, outfits like that have so much money, and the private sector feels, like there is money to be made through public education, even if it's not through outright privatization. privatization happens in many different ways. There's, all these contracts that go to tech companies to provide whatever.
Testing, having private companies do testing,
So now they're doing all the testing on what are basically called Chromebooks. And so, so all these students now need a Chromebook. Well, then now, a tech company gets the contract for that. Google would be the, the prime candidate for that. Dell also makes Chromebooks as well.
Where does the OEA stand on this? Keith Brown and the OEA, have they protested the attack on the students and parents and teachers here?
I would say, the OEA has been vocally in support of the anti-school closures movement. I don't think they put any resources, in order to, stop this assault on public education. Obviously their OEA is our local, the Oakland Education Association, and our state affiliate is the CTA, and I would basically describe the CTA as maybe the education arm of the Democratic Party. So you see there where you have this conflict of interest that we face, where our state affiliate is tied in with this, Democratic Party that ultimately is very much in favor of privatization, very much in favor of charters and legislation like Prop 39, which they, with a supermajority in the state legislature and a Democrat in the governor's office, they could easily change these laws.
Tony Thurmond, where does he stand on this? I understand he set up a commission to look at charters and put charter operators on the commission to investigate themselves.
Exactly. That's the problem that we face, is that, when the police investigate themselves, then they don't go to jail. And when the Democrats investigate themselves, nobody, loses. So that's, a big problem we face. And that's Democratic Party machine politics. Like everybody, it's corruption, extends down from the top down into the lower levels. So that's why we see here, like the school board being bought off by private sector interests.
And do you think the charter school law should be repealed in California that allows this?
Well, I'm sorry, one more time.
Charter school law being repealed in California? You think
they should definitely repeal that law, because that would basically eliminate the legality of charters. Now obviously they would probably try to find a way, as they have such cushy legislation that supports them. Charters, if they get turned down by the local school board here, they get a chance to appeal to the county for a lifeline, and then if that fails, they get to appeal to the state for a lifeline. So they have, 3 different places where they could go and, get there. But to me, I think, Steve, you're onto something. If the state repealed the charter law, that would make, charters effectively illegal again. That might be, helpful for us fighting these school closures.
And there's also a SLAP, this Coalition United Front Against Privatization. What does this have to do with the school with the privatization of the Port of Oakland?
So SLAP is something that started, shortly after the decision to close these. Well, what started as 18 schools got narrowed down to maybe 11 over 2 years rather than 18 in 1 year. So we started SLAP. Some teacher activists started meeting with ILWU activists, port workers, and we formed this coalition called Schools and Labor Against Privatization. And then we, kind of did, a big day where on April 29th, as our local, and then along with ILWU, had a day where we, had a collective response to the privatization we're facing, as well as the privatization they're facing of Howard Terminal, which is a terminal they use for training.
Another billionaire who owns charter schools, John Fisher, who owns the KIPP and the rocket ship school. So
exactly. The Don and Dolores Fisher Foundation was responsible for both KIPP and rocket ship, I believe, and their son John Fisher now is the, I think has the, whatever the controlling stake in those foundations. I don't know, because I do know that I think Don has passed, and so yeah, John Fisher and his whole family have been involved in the privatization of public education, and now they're going for this land grab down at the port, which will allow him and the A's organization to build a new ballpark, but
with $850 million in tax subsidies. And what do you think of the idea of, in Oakland, with all the issues and problems you have, giving $850 million for a private stadium owned by John Fisher, a billionaire?
I mean, it's absurd. And one say, he's, making this big claim, we're, providing the funding for the stadium all by ourselves. But, the other hand, it needs all this infrastructure. So there's no good way to get down to the Port of Oakland. There's no bus that go down that far. There's no BART station that's down there. So what it would require would be all this taxpayer-funded infrastructure to go in place before they could even open a ballpark down there and get their fans, which, you know.
And that's supported by Nancy Skinner, the Democrats here, Bonta, Gavin Newsom. The Democrats apparently are fine giving billions of dollars or giving hundreds of millions of dollars to a billionaire to build a stadium.
Yeah, which would be no surprise, as the Democrats as well as the Republicans are a party that represents capital in this country. They do not represent workers. So that is not surprising to us, and that's why we continue to have to fight in this state. You know, what we saw yesterday, where, you know, what that to me represents class war in this state, because here we have a school board representing the interests of the ruling class of Oakland and the real estate developers that want this land. Obviously, this is a beautiful stretch of land that overlooks the bay. So obviously they want to make money off this. They don't make any money with public education here. In fact, they know that their tax dollars have to go, despite the fact that they really don't pay taxes. So here we are, you know, getting assaulted by private security just to maintain public education for this community this school has been in for over 100 years.
I'm Nora Corey, community organizer and Oakland resident. I'm just happy to see the community take control and power back. You know, I've been following the school closures and just the attacks on public education for several years now, and just really excited to see the community standing up and standing together to claim this space and just to empower the youth and the families and the students in the neighborhood, and just supporting and showing up as I can, when I can, and to do whatever I can to support.
And I mean, some people at this occupation have said this is ethnic cleansing that's going on here. They're getting rid of black and brown working class community. I mean, does this have anything to do with that, what's happening elsewhere in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that the attacks on Oakland residents and students and black and brown communities are any different than just the attacks on communities of color all over the country and all over the world, you know, occupied by colonizing forces, militarization, policing. Just the level of violence, repression, and censorship. The censorship of the media and you know, anyone critical of these policies are just being shut down left and right. So most of the people don't even know that this is happening. So I'm really glad to see all the media out here and the community taking, you know, this the press conference to let folks know.
And as a Palestinian American activist who's fighting the oppression of the Palestinians, the role of the police there, the murders of Palestinians, I mean, it seems like it's a global problem.
Yes, absolutely. Just seeing, you know, these spaces being cleared out of their indigenous communities and the communities that have held these, you know, spaces for all these decades. The attacks are so parallel with what we're seeing, you know, all over Jerusalem, all over Palestine, of people being ethnically cleansed to make room for more desirable white people and colonizers that are just going to fall in line and not stand up to these unjust policies. So I'm here to support and stand in solidarity as a Palestinian, as a community organizer, as someone who cares deeply about this city.
The majority of us that do live in these communities, you know, there's a lot of parents that work just like me. And if they close this school down, that means our kids will have to either go to a school across town or to another district or walk further, war zone through war zone, because there's a lot of, you know, war zones in these communities just to get to school, and that's unsafe.